Okay, we're going to finish our conversation about Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 by looking at integers and by looking at multiplication. Now remember, when you're talking about multiplication, if it's all multiplication, every two negatives are going to cancel out because it takes two negatives to make a positive. So these two would kind of pair up so they would both cancel each other out and become positive. These two would cancel out and become positive, so that means my answer is going to be a positive answer. So if I were to take 2 times 5, which is 10, times 6, which would be 60, times 3, which would be 180, so it would be a positive 180. Now, I would probably just write 180 because you assume it's positive. If it's negative, they have to tell you. So if you look at the same kind of thing, these are all multiplied. These two right here, two negatives become a positive, so they cancel. But I have one here that can't cancel. So that means my answer has to be negative. So I would go ahead and go through and do 6 times 4 times 1 times 5 times 3, and I would get my 360, and I would have to know that that negative 360 is going to have to be the answer. Okay, now when you're evaluating, be careful that you actually put the parentheses around that. Because remember, this actually means negative 11 times negative 11, which is going to be a positive 121. If you don't put this negative 11 into parentheses, it's going to come out wrong and give you the wrong answer. So you've got to be careful with that. Now, with some of the other problems that you're going to see, you're going to have to do that please excuse my dear Aunt Sally when you see many operations. Now, I tend to bracket my multiply and divide and my add and subtract, because multiply and divide you do together from left to right. Add and subtract you do from left to right together, doing whichever one comes first. So if I look at this piece right here, 4 minus 6 is going to be negative 2. That's my parenthesis part. And then I'm going to bring everything else down. Notice that negative 5 had a parenthesis, but that was only because it stood for multiplication. Now there's no exponents at all. This is all multiply though. So 3 times negative 5 is negative 15 times 2 is going to be 30. So multiply and divide is done. The final one, the add and subtract, is going to be 36. Okay, now, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Parentheses in this one is just to keep that exponent on. So really, nothing here. We're going to have to deal with that exponent. So right here, negative 3 to the second would be negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive 9. And then I'm going to bring down the whole rest of the problem. Now I'm down to multiply and divide, so there are several of them right here. So if I ignore this 20, that minus 30 is going to make that like a negative 30. So negative 30 divided by 5 would be negative 6. So it becomes this. Okay, then, if I deal with this part, because there's still a multiplication there, negative 6 times 9 is going to be negative 54. Bring the rest of this down. Now multiply and divide is all done. I'm just down to add and subtract. So if I do 20 minus 54 plus 22, it's going to be negative 12. Okay, now, they use brackets that are a little bit different on this one, but I want you to know they really want you to do the same thing. Get the top down to one number and then get the bottom down to one number as well. And then we'll deal with this. So the bottom's kind of easy to see. 11 minus 8 is going to be 3. On the top we have a little more to do. So this multiplication is first. So negative 60 divided by 4 is going to be negative 15. Negative 15 plus 6 is going to be negative 9. Now once this is down to one number, then see if you can reduce this or divide it out evenly. This one you can, because negative 9 divided by 3 is going to be negative 3. Okay, this is evaluate. Now they're giving us x plus 7 for each of these. And my job is, if they say x is equal to 6, I'm going to plug that right in. So that's going to be 6 plus 7, which would be 13. Now if I have x plus 7 in this next one, I'm going to take 10 and plug it in there. So 10 plus 7 is going to equal 17. Now, evaluating down here, these are each different. So they want you to take this A and plug it in as 4. B is going to be 18. And C is going to be 12. So this is going to end up being 4 plus 18 plus 12, which is going to give me a total of 34. You just have to go through and be able to plug them in the right spot. Okay, a couple more combining like terms. So if I'm doing these, you can all see that there's an x as a variable and they completely match as far as the x's. But then we're just combining the numbers in front. So 9 plus negative 3 is going to be 6. So 6x is going to be our final answer. Okay, now in this one it wants us to identify like terms. So I can see this x and this one are going to match. Let me just change my color of my pen here. Then I can see these two match. And then this one is kind of shut out because there's nothing that's like it. So I have to find something that's going to put 8x and 6x together, because those would be a like term. And 5y and 7y are going to be like terms. So it's going to be this. If there was another m, I could make that a like term, but there's nothing else that is like it. Okay, just a couple more. Okay, now in something like this, if they want us to simplify, they want us to get our answer down as far as we can. If I look, this is all multiplication. So really, if I take 6, 4, and 5 and multiply them together, x can go on the end. So 6 times 4 is 24, times 5 would be 120. So this would be 120x. In this one, same thing. Take those 3 and multiply them together. So 3 times 6 is 18, times 5 would be 90. So 90 in the front, and y is going to go here on the bottom. Going to go right along for the ride. Okay, now this says use the properties of multiplication to answer this question. So they give you this question to begin with. And then they said this is going to be 13. What would y have to be in this spot? The only thing I could multiply 13 by to get to 0 would be if this was 0. So that means y would have to be 0.